Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. We've got another great guest, someone that I'm sure you have seen multiple times over the years, Jason Wahler. We go through his Enneagram type, uncover it, so to speak, on the show in real time as he just took the Enneagram assessment powered by Typology Institute. That is Ian's brand new assessment, which he spent the last 2 years developing. It's very, very comprehensive, gives you amazing readouts on your type, your wing, your subtype. And we go through that with Jason on the show today. Tell you a little bit about Jason. He is a passionate advocate for addiction, education, and prevention, as well as a familiar face from shows you might have seen: Laguna Beach, The Hills, Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, MTV. After publicly battling addiction, Jason turned his life around and has spent over 15 years working in recovery, serving as the director of the Change Your Brain Foundation and co-founding the YANA, Protecting the Fight Against Addiction Stigma. Now, you've probably seen this. He and his wife, Ashley, host a YouTube series called Jaws, where they tackle recovery, faith, and relationships with a real raw honesty. So you'll want to check that out. That's Jaws on YouTube. Hey, so happy to have you here today, folks. That's it from Anthony Skinner. And now, without any further ado, here is the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Enneagram 3 with a 2-wing, my friend Jason Wahler. Welcome to Typology.
Hey, brother. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I've been waiting for this conversation. You and I met, I don't know, within the past 18 months.
Yeah, I'd say almost like a couple of years ago now.
I guess, yeah. We met through our mutual friend, Steve Lee.
Yes.
And gosh, we have a lot to talk about. We share a common recovery journey. And I'm super stoked because you only just learned through the Typology Institute, Enneagram assessment, that you are an Enneagram 3 with a 2-wing. What do you think?
Well, that's why I got you here. I want to learn more about it. I mean, when we came on, I thought I was, after doing the test, I thought I was actually a 7. That's what I recall from 4 years ago, but clearly times have changed, and now I'm a 3. And I actually, after reading through the information, it makes sense. But something that I'm very curious about is, and nobody's ever explained it to me before, is actually what the wing means.
Ah, okay.
Just
so let's talk about.
He came out as from the test as a 1-to-1 3 wing 2.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just give you an overview of 3s, and then I'll tell you about the wings. All right. So the core type 3, right? They're often called the performer or the achiever, and they're driven by a deep desire for success, for admiration, and for personal accomplishment, right? So these are highly motivated, adaptable, image conscious, goal setting, and productivity minded people, right? They really value efficiencies, and they work hard to be seen as being competent and impressive. Like they want people to be like, whoa, Jason Wahler, wow, what a guy. At their best, when they're really healthy in their personality, the Enneagram 3s are inspiring, they're authentic, and they're more community-minded, and they're able to uplift others through their confidence and their charisma and their drive. When they're not doing well, when they're at their worst, they can become overly focused on external validation. So in other words, seeming becomes more important than being. Does that make sense? Like it's about the mask. It's the mask of being impressive. They can be chameleon-esque when they're not very healthy, right?
Okay.
And when they're not doing well, they struggle with sort of feelings of worthlessness if they don't achieve or appear successful to other people. So in short, Enneagram 3s have a profound need to succeed, to appear successful to others, and to avoid failure almost at all costs. Their basic fear is of being worthless, and their basic desire is to feel valuable and worthwhile. So how does that all ring for you? Let's just start there.
First of all, that's incredible. I have a quick question I want to ask though.
Yeah.
Have you seen what typically drives an Enneagram 3 to go off course?
It depends on what you mean by off course.
Well, I mean, if they're in flow and they're doing well and they're in that healthy state of mind, what typically makes them go the other way? I mean, I know that's probably a pretty broad question, but is there something that you see that stands out that really diverts the 3 to go into those unhealthy behaviors and or habits?
Yeah. So when a 3 is under stress, right, for whatever reason, they start to look like unhealthy 9s. Okay. And I won't tell you why that's the case, but that's what all those arrows on the Enneagram thing means.
Yep.
So like, do you have it right in front of you?
I have it right in front of me.
Okay. So you see how there are arrows, right?
Yep.
So when the 3 is under stress, do you see how they move toward the low side of 9, unhealthy 9? And when they're doing great, they look like a healthy 6. You see the other arrow?
Yep.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So when you're not doing well, you go to the low side of 9 where you start to get depressed, kind of slothful, indecisive, losing focus. You'll start to care less about your appearance to other people. You become unmotivated. Yeah, those are just a few things. When you're doing great, you go to the high side of 6, and there you become less of a lone wolf looking out for your own success, and you become more, how do I make everybody a success? How can I help others achieve success instead of being so focused on my own personal success, among other things, right? That's a very quick overview, but that's the idea.
It's so fascinating to see that. And I mean, everything that you were stating, I remember when I was a young kid, even at like 4 or 5 years old, I don't know if it had to do with me being the youngest child of 4, but I was always just very motivated, very self-driven. I remember, just even wanting praise and accolades from my parents when I was, being outside in the front of the house, dribbling the soccer ball and just practicing and, doing the same thing with baseball, and just kind of always like, hey, look what I'm doing, and I don't, again, there could have been unhealthy attention seeking there, but I also had a gifted ability with athletics, and it was something that I thrived in, and it was something that, also became a part of my identity. But it's so funny as you say this. I mean, another funny story when I was young, and this may be the alcoholic in me, but I'll never forget. I mean, even as just an entrepreneur, at literally 5 years old, man, I'd go down the street with my red wagon. I'd go to my neighbor's house, cut their roses, and then offer them bouquets to purchase on their own. And the lady walked me back to my house and it literally like by the ear, what I mean? Like,
oh my gosh.
Like, Mrs. Wahler, your son's over here cutting my roses, trying to sell them to me. And I mean, they couldn't help but laugh.
Wow.
And I mean, that was one of many things that I would partake in at a young age, but very driven and motivated. And it's crazy though, as you fast forward a little bit through time, I felt like I had this energy and this, there was a very positive side to me that was very outgoing, very enthusiastic, very, very good with people at a young age. And I actually encountered down the road, and I don't want to go too far off track here, but it was crazy. It was almost like that light that I had about me really went away at about age of 12 or 13 years old. And that was when I struggled severely. I started struggling severely with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, to the point actually where I'd wash my hands until they'd bleed, and I'd have to wear neoprene gloves with Neosporin in them to deal with the repercussions and the aftermath of it. But that OCD like took me into such a deep, dark place that everything that I can remember and looking back as a young child was completely taken away. And again, saw psychiatrists, saw therapists, had amazing support system within my family, was put on medication, helped mitigate the symptoms, but never really, did the deep work and came to the core underlying issue. And then that's what, ended up starting me on the track with addiction. But it's just crazy looking at all this stuff, because as you were explaining the pros and cons, I can obviously identify with that immediately in my current life, but I also can even go all the way back to when I was a young kid And as I've had more sobriety time, more and more memories and stuff start to come up by the grace of God with that. And it's just crazy to see how true that was throughout my history of my life these last 38 years, And so it just really ties into that. And the way I take, and that's where I know it was a very broad statement and or question that I had asked about, the threes going into the negative state and where that is. But it's just like, I can relate that so much for me when I'm actively in recovery and working a program and doing what I need to do on a daily basis versus deviating and falling off of that, how I can quickly turn to that other side. And a lot of that is heavily influenced from, like you were saying, stress, right? I mean, there's, and just being overwhelmed and being able to function and operate at the highest level is so imperative for me to have, structure and consistency really creates safety for me. And so I've learned that, like, it's when I have that structure consistency, my life tends to flourish. And when I don't have that in place, it tends to deviate off course. And it's happened, multiple times throughout my life, but it's just so funny how you say it from the breakdown of this and just how much it correlates with my story.
Yeah. You asked before we started, like, what's the difference between a 3-wing 2 and a 3-wing 4? And just to help you out with that, right? So here's what wings do. You have 2 wings, and it's always the 2 numbers adjacent to yours on the Enneagram. So if you look at the Enneagram, you'll see that there's a 2 and a 4 on either side of your number.
Yep.
Okay. So you have both wings, but one of them is dominant. Okay. It has more influence than the other. So you are always a 3. Okay. But you are seasoned and colored by many of the characteristic strengths and challenges of an Enneagram 2, the helper. So let me just describe a 3 with a 2. Okay. So what the 2 does to a 3 is it kind of brings this warmth, this sociability, and a really strong desire to be liked. Okay. And these 3s tend to be a little bit more charming, extroverted, outgoing, and they're very relational. Okay. So an Enneagram 3, remember, they're very focused on success and the appearance of success. And for this 3 with a 2, it's success through relationships. So they often use strong interpersonal skills to achieve success. So they're incredible networkers. They're incredible mentors or leaders who thrive on connection with other people. They tend to be more adaptable and giving than a 3 with a 4 wing. But like a 3 with a 4 wing, although a little bit more than a 3 with a 4th wing, actually, they may shapeshift to meet other people's needs.
Okay.
And they can become overly focused on gaining approval. Right? So they can become overly people-pleasing or manipulative in their pursuit of validation and admiration. Make sense?
That's so crazy. Well, that's why I entered into Al-Anon for the people.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Tell people what Al-Anon is, because a lot of our folks won't know.
Well, I mean, it's to help deal with codependency, and it's for me on my side. I'm newer to the program. But basically, in the simplest form, it's like, basically receive validation through other people's approval is at least from like what you're stating here is a core crux of why I entered into it. A lot of people will enter into Al-Anon, if they have a loved one that struggles with substance abuse and they're the enabler or the codependent to that person's addiction. And, for me, though, I do have a lot of people around me that struggle with addiction within my family. So I would qualify from that perspective. But for me, after doing a deep dive and some deep work, a mutual friend kind of called out, like after, just took 5 years of sobriety. He's like, hey, I think it'd be a really good idea for you to take a look at entering into Al-Anon when it comes to, the people pleasing and learning to say no and really setting boundaries for yourself. And so for me, that's something that I really needed to take into heart and to look at. And the more that I've taken care of myself, I can see some of those negative effects that I have, or those character defects that really are robbing me the greatest opportunity of growth within myself. And at the end of the day, what I'm taking away in these early stages, I'm very open about it. I'm on step 2 right now as we're going through the process. But as I'm going through and participating in this, it's so apparent that at the end of the day, we don't have the power to change anybody or anything. The only thing that we have the power to do is influence change and or change ourselves.
Right.
And so it's been a deep, hard look. And again, it's probably not like the best explanation because, again, it's the way I entered into this. So it's not as traditional as it would be for somebody that is struggling with a loved one with substance abuse. But it's a support group. They walk you through the process and help you identify the areas that may be causing distress and or unmanageability within your life based on others' behaviors and or actions.
Yeah.
You want to add to that, Ian?
No, first of all, my wife is an Al-Anon ninja. She has, she's, goes to regular meetings. She's got a sponsor. She's got a son in recovery. She's got a husband in recovery. And she knows a lot about being, prior to going into her own recovery, about, people pleasing and enabling and turning a blind eye when she didn't want to see things. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of like a textbook family of recovery over here at the Cron household. Man, it has been such a life. I wish everybody would be an Al-Anon, actually. Like it's so amazing to go through the 12 steps to realize, how to have boundaries, how to say no, how to realize that I don't have power over people, places, and things. Yes, I can influence change, but ultimately outcomes are not my business. All that kind of stuff. Oh, man.
Well, that's what I said. I think a really... Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just going to say, on your assessment and your wing scores, you scored 64% as a wing 2. So that, according to the assessment, that does have a lot of influence on your 3. So
yeah, no, you're pretty strong 2 wing.
Oh yeah, my right wing's broken. That wing 4 don't work. But no, I think just like looking at that, I just wanted to add like a codependent, and again is because I think this is really important, for people to understand, because wherever there's an alcoholic or an addict, there's a codependent, and sometimes they're just as sick, if not sicker. And I think it's really important for people to understand the role that they could play within that. And I think a codependent too, like more maybe speaking to myself with what I'm going through with it, is a codependent is one whose well-being or emotional state is based on how someone else is doing / feeling. I think that's like a pretty good. I actually took a note of that I wanted to find. But yeah, it's so interesting to hear how all this comes into play. And it's so funny because it just is validation, and it just brings clarity to where I'm at in my life with the work that I'm doing on myself, and just kind of how this test or this assessment is able to so clearly break down, the areas of quality and that are beneficial and that help you grow and have success, and how it can pinpoint really the areas of deficit or default when you're not in a healthy state of mind. And it's interesting if you're looking like if you're on the beam, you know what I mean, and you're doing well, kind of how these things can really add value in your life and how you can be successful in what it is that you're doing versus you deviate and get off course where it can take you. And I don't know, it's just really fascinating to me. I mean, I've never had somebody break it down. Like even when I did it in the past, it was just like I did it and I read it and it's like, okay, I kind of understand it, but not to the complexity or as clear as you've broken it down. It just makes it fascinating to me. And it creates a lot of question and wonder on how to best support, so I guess one of my questions would be for you is, based on the number that you have, what is the best way to go about diving into and or helping you fulfill your fullest potential?
Yeah. Well,
it's a very 3 question.
I think the cool thing about the Enneagram is it reveals, and I'll tell you, it's really helpful on the journey of recovery. Like I'm always telling people, if it's appropriate, you should really get your sponsees to do an Enneagram test, and you should just read about what's going on under the hood of their lives. Like it just gives incredible insights. Incredible insights. So for example, I have a sponsee who's a 7. 7s are the enthusiasts. You know about them.
Yep.
And I know right off the bat that one of the things he doesn't want to feel is any kind of pain. And every time there's pain, he wants to run towards some intense experience or towards, fun or adventure or travel. Or I'm like, so so I can actually spot when he's starting to go off the rails a little
Yeah.
bit. And because I know that a 7, when they're not doing well, goes to the low side of 1, I can spot when he's in stress and maybe potentially heading toward a slip or a relapse. Like I'm able to kind of go, oh, okay. And just be able to ask good questions in the moment just because I know his Enneagram type. And he has found it incredibly useful.
That's powerful. I mean, because I always say what's predictable is preventable, right? And I mean, so if you have that knowledge and the understanding of what's there.
Oh, I love that. Anthony, did you hear that? Say that again.
That's like,
say it again. What is predictable is preventable.
And I don't know where you guys are on this. And even when I say that, again, as medical people, and I mean, everybody has kind of their opinion of this, because I also, with that being said, I do not think relapse is necessarily a part of recovery. I think it's a lack thereof. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, and again, you're talking to a guy that's relapsed so many dang times, right? But I look at when I originally got sober, July 23rd, 2010, and acquired multiple years of sobriety. And I ended up relapsing. But if I look back and see the areas where I started to deviate and to fall off, I mean, stop working with my sponsor, stop going to meetings, stop seeing my therapist, stopped attending church, all the things that I had done to get me to where I was at, I stopped doing. And so for me in my journey and in my story, I know how important those things are and how high of a priority they have to take in my life because of where it can take me when I fall off. And so looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like all these things that I've gone through and all these things that I had done, you know, I could have prevented these things had I taken the appropriate measures with this.
Yes.
And the way I looked at it is like, it's like a domino falling, right? Like and look, by no means is my life perfect, but if I have a domino or 2 fall in a day, it's much easier to pick up a couple dominoes than if there's 50 that have fallen, right? Yeah. And so then it gets overbearing. And that's an analogy I try to use. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but hopefully the listeners understand.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious as what your thoughts are on that.
I love what you just said. I like how I just heard this thing in a meeting the other day. A guy said, listen, if you're on a train and you miss getting off it at your station, like you go by your station on it, and he said, you need to get off that train as soon as possible, because the further you go on the train, the more expensive it is to come back to the station you were supposed to get off at. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what happens in recovery. If you don't get off the train at the right station, you better get off soon after that as fast as you can, because coming back to it is going to get more and more expensive, right?
It's so true. And that's the part about being just very open, honest, and transparent. The thing that killed me when I'd relapsed was the lack of willingness to get completely open and honest. Surrender, be in a place of being willing to take guidance and direction again. My own ego got in the way of all of those things. And so I love the analogy of the train, though. I mean, it's so true. But I think that's why for me, when it comes to my recovery program and what I have on a daily basis, I have a pretty regimented routine that I abide by. And it's worked wonders in my life. It really has. And it's funny. I'm actually reading a book right now, which I'm sure a lot of people have read and or have heard of, The Atomic Habits, and just the importance behind a lot of that and how that continued growth comes into place for me when I have those in play. But it's like when my life is in order and in structure, it just tends to operate so much better. Yeah.
We had James on the show about 2 years ago, Anthony.
Yeah.
James was on the show. And we had a really, really good conversation. And was he an 8 or a 3? I can't remember.
I think he was a 3.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he's a 3.
Can I say one more thing about I just want to highlight a couple of these things because of walking through sort of the type that Jason is in real time here, and because he's taken the test. You scored equally as a 2 and a 3, but it was definitive that you were a 3 with the strong wing 2, which is like the things that you're talking about and the codependency. That's what the reason I highlighted that is because even what you described as a codependent can be the 2's challenge. And I was just thinking, because you are a 3 and because you know how to present and because you can charm, it's like that would be something I would think you'd have to watch out as a recovery, because you can present what they need to see so that you can protect yourself,
Yeah.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
I recommend everyone go to therapy. But it can be difficult to make time for traditional in-person therapy, and it can be expensive. It can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But did you know that with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save on average up to 50% per session? Their flat fee for weekly sessions can save you big on cost and time. With online therapy, you'll get quality care at a price that makes sense. So, whether you're already striving toward a specific goal, struggling to set healthy boundaries, or looking for ways to manage anxiety or everyday stress, BetterHelp therapists are trained to empower you to become the best version of yourself. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. And with their diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties, you're sure to find one that works for you. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. So, don't wait. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/Typology podcast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Typology podcast. So let me give you a story, Jason. I've told this on the show before, but I don't care because it's a great story and it's actually really particular to you and you will understand this. So there was a guy, he was a pastor of a big church, and he got a DUI, right? So he got pulled over, he got busted. It's in the newspaper. He's got this huge church, and it is a major fall from the heights, right? Okay. So now, just so you know, 2s, 3s, and 4s, more than most other types, struggle with shame, okay? And that's why they project an image, right? They project images because they don't believe they can be loved for who they are, 3s, but only for what they accomplish or what they do, okay? So he comes into the room and he's just devastated. He is wrecked, right? He's been a secret alcoholic for a couple of years and now he's got a DUI. He has lost his job at the church or he's whatever. So he actually goes to a meeting about 20 miles from his home because he doesn't want to run into anybody who could see him. There's the shame. Right? Big time shame. Then he gets in the room and he's so polished and he's so good at crafting an image to impress other people. I'm not kidding you. Within 2 weeks, he was the most admired recovering alcoholic in that room. He is quoting stuff.
Leading the group.
He's leading the group. People with 30 years of recovery are all saying, this guy is amazing. And finally, so what had happened was, his initial mask of impressiveness and awesomeness had collapsed. He got in the room and just not consciously, but just reflexively created this new awesome image that was so impressive to everybody in the room that everyone's like, that guy's sobriety is amazing. He's like, he's been sober for 20 minutes. And so his sponsor was so smart. He was catching on to what was happening here. Like this guy was literally getting a following in the rooms of recovery, right? Wow. And he said to him, for the next 6 months, you can't talk in meetings.
Wow.
He said, you just got to shut up and sit there and listen. And he just saw that the guy was coming up with a new impressive external projected identity to win over the other people and to gain their approval and their validation and their admiration. He just was lusting for admiration. I mean, that's a 3 thing when they're not healthy, right? And for attention and to be seen as the paragon. They want to become the poster child of whatever group they're in. So he's trying to become the poster child of recovery now, right? And he's succeeding at it. Like it's crazy, right? And but instead his sponsor shut it down. And what he was doing was basically telling the guy, look, you have to live with the discomfort now of having this former image-based life destroyed. And we have to keep that mask down long enough that the shoots of your true self will emerge and you'll realize I can be loved for who I really am, not just for my image not just for success and achievement. It was an amazing moment for me.
We have another great, I'll say it really quickly, story with Maddie Jackson, Alan Jackson's daughter.
Yeah.
She lost her first husband, and she was aware enough of her sort of threeness to know that, because she wanted to write a book, but she knew she needed to sit on it for a season and not just maximize the tragedy, but created an opportunity. And she sort of self-checked herself, said, no, I got to wait a season before I do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Very three stuff.
I can give you the summarization of an unhealthy 3. It sounds like an overinflated ego with an underestimated sense of self-worth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So, listen, a lot of 3s rely on the external validation of others and achievement to buttress their self-worth, their self-esteem, right? And because, again, they don't believe they can be loved for who they are, but only for what they do and for what they accomplish. I oftentimes say what Enneagram 3s want is love, but they settle for admiration. Right? They settle for admiration, and then they get into curating their image, landscaping their self-presentation to have the maximum effect on other people. But it causes a lot of loneliness, and they live with a lot of shame.
If you're dealing with an unhealthy 3, for all your listeners who are out there that are 3s that may be in this state of mind that you're talking about, is there any suggestions or tools or resources that you could advise for them to help get out of that state of mind? And again, I know it's probably a broad question because it's contingent on the circumstances and things like that, but is there quick tips that can be provided?
Yeah. One of the things that 3s have to learn to do is how to be a human being versus a human doing. So spending time on developing the capacity for just getting in touch with who they truly are behind the masks, going on a journey of self-discovery to get in touch with that. And all of that sounds very unappealing. Listen to an Enneagram 3, right? Like they're like, wait a minute, I got a lot to do. Like, I'm all about goals. I'm all about productivity. I'm all about crushing it. I'm all about getting stuff done. I've been lauded and praised for that my whole life. That's where my self-worth comes from. And now you're telling me to focus on how to be? That sounds really woo-woo and really like not going to be a win for me. And yet that is the journey of learning that they are beloved for who they are, not for what they do and not for their image, and how to live in the world. We talk about that the deadly sin. Every type has a deadly sin, right? And the deadly sin for 3s is deceit. And what we mean by that is that the 3s are constantly projecting so many images to wow and impress and to win the validation of others that they eventually deceive themselves into thinking, oh, I am those masks, when they're not. They're just projections. Just projections, right?
Wow.
And so they have to learn to move toward what we call the virtue of authentic selfhood, becoming authentic, becoming real. And whatever helps that journey along is what they have to do. So, for a guy in recovery like yourself, I mean, one of the things I love about our program of recovery is that the 12 steps in our meetings, man, few things will help you learn how to get real faster than having a really bad problem with an addiction. I mean, just, whoa.
So crazy that you say that. I'll just, on my, me and my wife do this little podcast where we talk just about our journey, me being the alcoholic and addict and her being, the codependent and what it was like going through that. And I just shared, one of the most beautiful gifts about sobriety was for me to get to know who I really am. What it is I like, what I like to do, it was just the discovery of self at the deepest level. And it's so funny to kind of tie this full circle now. Is that kid that I told you that lost that ambition and that drive at 11, I really feel has resurfaced and come back in these last couple of years. I mean, even, like I said, I just took 5 years in December, but those first couple of years again, was a lot of getting through the smoke, if you will, and then coming out. But like this time around, the work that went into self was huge. And to be in a place of identifying like the greatest gift of sobriety was to truly know who I am again, and to find that peace and that happiness that's the biggest reward that I've received from all of this.
Well, and isn't that why we oftentimes hear in meetings, like someone will say, oh, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic, or I'm a grateful recovering addict, or overeater, or whatever your thing is, right? It's because, so I had to go through a really hard season, but what I got from recovery, from hitting that bottom, and then what I learned in recovery was well worth the price of admission for me. Like I'm just grateful actually now. I had a friend say something the other day, blew my mind. Are you ready, Anthony? This is a good one. He said to me, Ian, a day will come when you will love the thing that you wish most hadn't happened to you. And I'm like, dude, say that again. He said, a day will come when you will learn to love the very thing that you wish most hadn't happened to you. And I'm like, you're right. That's my story. Like, I've learned to love the thing I wished hadn't happened to me, right? Because of what it gave me in the end.
Well, it's like your greatest deficits become your greatest assets. You know what I mean? Like, trust me, I never thought I'd be in the spot that I am today, nor did I want to. You know, when I was young, I wasn't like, I can't wait to be an advocate for substance abuse and mental health, you know, when I was 12, 13 years old. But through all the trials and tribulations and having to go through it, you know, it's, I wouldn't change a thing, you know, and be able to be in a place where I mean that, you know, there's a lot of things that really shaped and directed me. Cause there was even years when I had that first 5 years of sobriety back when I got sober in July 2010, you know, there's like, there's a lot of things I would have changed. And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't have done this or I wouldn't have done that. And like, there's a lot of shame and stuff that was associated with that. But man, is without that pain, there would have been no growth. And that's where the true benefit came.
So I have a friend of mine, and he's actually a super wise person. And he's been in a program of recovery for probably 30 or 40 years. And he says that he used to think of his addiction as the enemy. And then one day he woke up and he changed his whole sort of belief system around it. He said, now I understand my addiction to be my most treasured teacher. Like my addiction is my teacher. Right.
As you were saying that, though, it's almost like if you take some of those addictive tendencies, and again, not from a healthy perspective, but you can also translate it to be something that's very beneficial for you.
Tell me more.
I think when you look at, I mean, the amount of time and energy that we used to put into using, I'll say for myself, it was a 24/7 thing. You know, I mean, you know, we often hear when you're drinking, it's not even being able to focus on the drink that you have at hand. It's where, you know, the drink you're getting 3 hours on the road. And then from there, you know, if you're putting other things in there, whether it's booger sugar or different types of pills or whatever it may be.
Did you just call cocaine booger sugar?
Somebody's got to do it, man.
Never heard it. Glad to know about it now.
Yeah. But whatever it may be. And it's just like, man, and so it's being able to take that time and energy and effort that I used to put into my substances towards things that are quality and a benefit, whether it's my family, whether it's my relationship with the Lord, whether it's, you know, whatever it may be. It's the same thing with my OCD. I was able to take something that was a complete setback and turn it into something that was positive. And now, I mean, whether it's funny or not, I mean, you know, all jokes aside, it's like you come to my house, dude, like my OCD is manifested into something that is something I enjoy. My clothes are color coordinated. My socks are organized. Like I'm detail oriented, but it's not debilitating like it used to be. But I've been able to take something that was a very big hindrance and a negative and be able to incorporate it into a benefit and a positive. And so, like, again, jumping back to addiction, and the way that I live my life now, I put time, energy, and effort into being very intentional with my family, being very intentional with my kids, being very intentional with my wife, with my program. I have a very rigorous routine that I abide by. It takes effort, it takes energy, it takes time, just as it did to be an active alcoholic or an active addict. And I put a lot of that energy and emphasis in that, and I basically flipped the script and had it become something that was beneficial to me because I also think addiction is like a superpower, man. I mean, it's like a survival gene that if you can tap into, I mean, think of what we would do and how we would operate and to get what we needed to get. But if we could use that for the good, a lot of great can come out of that. And again, it's with appropriate balance and stuff like that, because anything of too much, I think could be unhealthy. Even the things that we see as positive in life, it's, I don't know, it's been something that's been incredible to see how it's like, if I were to look in the rearview mirror and reflect on my journey and just my prioritization and the things that are important to me, and what alcohol, just what my addiction and alcoholism is allowed me to change in my life. I mean, I'm forever grateful.
It's interesting. You brought up two things I want to just highlight, and then I want to jump into some more Enneagram stuff with you. So I was always laughing. I was telling someone the other day, I said, do you want to meet an alcoholic? I said, do you want to go to a place where you could meet 30 alcoholics in one shot? And they're like, sure, tell me where. I go to a climbing gym. All right, just go to a climbing gym. And you're going to see a bunch of young guys who are all buff, like they've been working out a ton. They're just taut. They are cut and they're working out. And I said, because what they've done is that, for number one, it's intense. It gives them adrenaline, right? And they have transferred all the energy that they were investing in drinking or drugging. Now they've invested the same energy, turned all those energies toward exercise and sort of high risk activities, which is better than what they were doing before. So I never say to them, stop doing that too much, but eventually they have to get to a place where it's like, okay, dude, this is too much. Like, you are now climbing and exercising alcoholically. Like, it's too much. And
right.
We have to get you back to balance. But for now, let's just run with the climbing. That's fine. Until you get a year under your belt, I can live with you doing that, Well,
but you bring up I just wanted to interject real quick, or just a thought that came to mind too. And I think it's so important for people to understand, especially that are new in recovery. Your brain produces more potent chemicals than heroin, right? I mean, you just got to let it work, right? And so it's engaging and being a part of activities like the natural highs of life, whether you hit a good golf shot, you catch a perfect wave, whatever it is that you love participating in. But those endorphins and the serotonin, I mean, the dopamine that is released in those things, I mean, it can have such a positive effect on your life. And so when you're talking about these rock climbing and different things, like, I also think it's been so instilled, at least when I was young, like the only way to have fun or to be able to go and enjoy life was associated with partying and being out. And it's like, dude, it's the complete opposite. I mean, to maintain and sustain a long lasting high is actually done naturally.
Yeah. And like I said, until it becomes like just another kind of addictive behavior, right? And like I said, I'm okay with that kind of, like, if you're giving up drinking or drugs or overeating or whatever, and this is where you're going to transfer your energy in the short term, I'm all in favor of it. Eventually, you're going to have to realize that maybe you're overdoing it and pull back so it's more in balance. Yeah. But I wrote this new book, The Fix, right? Which is about the 12 steps. Oh, nice. So in it, I talk about, did you ever read C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce?
I haven't.
Oh, dude, you've got to read it. Ay. Okay, so in it, there's a guy, and he's in heaven, and he's a ghost, and he's talking with an angel, and he hasn't gotten into heaven yet, right? And he's sitting there, and this angel is trying to speak with him about what it would take for him to, cross over into heaven. And this guy has a demon on his shoulder. It's like a little miniature dragon, and it's like spitting sulfur and stuff. And this thing is like just attached to him, and it's whispering in his ear, "You cannot live without me. You can't live without me." And it's like a perfect metaphor for addiction. And the angel says to this guy, he says, "Let me kill it for you." And the guy's like, I can't let you kill it. Like, I need it. And the demons, the more the angel is saying to him, like, let me kill it, the demon is going, no, don't let him do that. You know what I mean? And eventually the guy gives in and says, okay, kill it. And it's a terribly painful exercise, but the angel kills this demon on the shoulder. But here's the amazing thing. The demon, or the whatever we call it, transforms into this beautiful white horse. And the guy now is no longer a ghost, but a full human being. And he jumps up onto the horse and rides off laughing into the hills. And so there's this incredible analogy of where something that was killing us, something that told us we couldn't live without it, when we allow God to kill it, and the steps for us is a way, not the only way, but a way for that to happen, right? Can become a glorious steed on which we now move off into the world, doing wonderful things. And that's what you were just describing.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a great story. Perfect. And you can read it in my book. Please do. Hey, folks, have you grabbed your copy of my new book, The Fix, yet? If so, I'd love to hear what you think. I do read reviews, and your feedback helps others find the book. Share your thoughts or reviews on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, or anywhere you order books. Okay, now, here's the next thing I want to ask you about. So in The Fix, I talk about this idea, and this is not new to you, but it is to a lot of my readers, right? That you didn't have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. You had an alcohol solution.
Yeah, of course.
You had a drug solution, right? So what were you trying to solve through substances that you felt, man, this is the most efficient way for me to deal with X? What was it you were trying to solve?
Well, first, I mean, I think there's a lot of power in understanding that drugs and alcohol were my solution, right? And when I removed those, I was left with what those emotional feelings, and I was left with self. And internally, I was dealing with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, depression. I was dealing with, going back to some of the stuff from the Enneagram 3, is image, just never amounting to enough. And just really, it got to a place where I was just wanting to be comfortable in my own skin. And again, is alcohol, again, going back to when I was 12 years old, dealing with the OCD, and that medication and stuff helped mitigate those symptoms from what I was dealing with. But when I found alcohol a couple years later, man, it was like, who needed medication? And so it quieted the mind.
Yeah.
It made me feel more, I was able to conversate better. At least I thought I was, ended up giving me an identity. It also gave me the ability to become what I thought was like the life of the party, even though I was out of control. It gave a false perception of something of me, so I didn't have to focus on those issues that I was dealing with.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. Like, we don't have time to do it today, but there are so many ways that the Enneagram plays with addictions. Because actually, if you think about it, every type has addictive patterns, right?
Yeah.
Enneagram 1s, the improvers, there's kind of an addiction to being right, to doing things just so. And 2s to pleasing, to meeting the needs of others and winning appreciation that way, right? Becomes codependent kinds of behaviors become addiction, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And what you're describing is a 3, almost to a T, in addiction, right? It's like, I could finally relax, the voice is quieted, and it helps you craft a whole new image in the world of being the guy, right? And until the solution, and the shame. And shame is a big thing, like I told you, for 2s, 3s, and 4s, right? Shame is a very big theme in all of their lives.
Well,
And
shame, the acronym I came up with for shame is self-hatred against my existence.
Oh,
Wow.
I heard another one the other day I like too, which is should have already mastered everything.
That's awesome.
I like that too, right? That feeling of like not enough, should have already mastered everything. So I love that you just sort of articulated that, how drugs and alcohol were a solution to your problem, and the problem was very 3-ish, right? In shape, in form, and for other types.
Well, it's almost, Ian, real quick, it's almost interesting. Just as we think about this, it was like I was almost in a healthy state of a 3 up until I was 11. And then that diversion of what happened is going into the unhealthy state at such a young age. I lost sight, did not know how to deal with and or cope. And that's the turning point of the solution that I was able to pull onto.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. It was just kind of, it came to me. It was interesting to think about that, because I think there was the innocence in not having to, well, even to take it further, is being the 3 and where I was at when the OCD came in, it almost robbed me of the ability to do the positive things a 3 could do. Does that make sense? Like it almost, that OCD almost took all that away. Almost, if you were to look at it as like, that's my power. Basically, the OCD took that away, and I was kind of left with, because I couldn't focus on being, it was more of, now I'm dealing with this internal neurological obsessive thinking that was coming up. It almost kind of just robbed me of the way I was operating. I don't know. It's making me think about this.
Did the alcohol, when you were drinking, did it mitigate or lessen the symptoms of OCD?
Oh, for sure.
Right. It probably slowed down the loop of anxious thinking and the whole thing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so, that it makes all the sense in the world, like I was on a retreat last week and I was leading group therapy for a bunch of addicts. So in the group, I had, five people, four of whom were identified chemical addicts, everything from, alcoholics to drug addicts. And we had 2 sex addicts in the group. I love these. I mean, it just sounds crazy, but I love leading group therapy with addicts. I think it's the best, right?
Yeah.
And some of them had one of them was only sober 2 months, but the other is probably over a year. But they were doing a lot of hard work on themselves in the group. It's so interesting when you look at these guys and they describe their stories. Like, I just look at them all and I say, well, of course you found alcohol and drugs. Like, why are you beating yourself up? Of course you did. And in a way, thank God, because you might be dead if you hadn't found it to hold you over until you got here. You know what I mean? So I'm not encouraging people to go use like drugs or alcohol, in any way, shape, or form. All I'm saying is that when I meet an alcoholic or a drug addict, sometimes I look at them and I hear their histories and I'm like, well, of course you did. Like, this was a great solution in your mind. And I get it. And now we have to find another solution. And if in your case, it was a great solution to, some of the issues with OCD and how it was fundamentally preventing you from achieving and doing the things that you had been used to doing, it kind of made that go away. And in your little 12-year-old brain, of course you went, or 15-year-old brain or whatever it was when you started drinking, it's like, of course you said, oh, this is the answer to all of life's problems.
Yeah.
And until it became a bigger problem than the problem it was trying to solve.
Correct. It's what is the theory or thought that I've said too is like, those negative thoughts and feelings can ultimately become your reality. You can basically manifest them into play. Like the things that I never wanted to become, I ultimately became.
Yeah. Yeah. And just when you became that, you moved the goalposts.
They kept moving, man.
They kept moving. Hey, listen, tell folks what you're doing, where they can find. I mean, you've got this great thing you're doing with your wife, Jaws. Just tell people where they can find out more about it.
Yeah, I'll give you a high level overview. So, I mean, if you guys are just wanting to connect more, obviously the easiest place is either Instagram, Jason Wahler, or my website, jasonwahler.com. My wife and I have been doing a show called Jaws, which is like the Jaws of Addiction, but it's actually Ashley and my's name, Jason and Ashley Wahler story. And we basically walk through what it's like being an alcoholic and an addict, also a codependent and an enabler, and how we navigated this journey and how we came out on the other end and how we were raising a family, how we're navigating through life. It's our story about faith. And solution. And so it's a really intimate journey into our life and how we deal with this on a daily basis. We actually started the show 5 years ago, and we walked through what it was like for me in my first year of sobriety with her. And so we documented that. It was really cool to be able to do that together as a couple. So we relaunched that, and I think we're on like our 10th or 11th episode right now, which has been incredible. And it's been a great thing for us to be able to connect at a deeper level. And then I've been working very closely with Dr. Daniel Amen at the Change Your Brain Foundation. We have some major initiatives and really trying to revolutionize the way that we look at brain health and mental health. And I mean, our mission is to end mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health. And how we're doing that is through research. We're doing that through scholarships, and we're doing that through education. And so we're really wanting to have the brain be looked at as regularly as any other organ in the body. If you think about it, psychiatry is one of the only medical professions that they don't look at the organ that they treat. And so we're wanting to change that narrative. And it's alarming, especially since there's so many people out there that struggle. I mean, whoever's alive today, half the population is going to deal with the mental health crisis and or breakdown. And we're trying to get in the front of that, as you guys know, as the younger population, and as the younger they're getting, it seems like the more affected that they are. And so trying to get in front of all of that to make a significant change. So if you want to learn more about the Change Your Brain Foundation, go to changeyourbrain.org.
Nice. Well, Jason, I could keep going, man. I mean, I love this conversation, and I love As you know, I love talking about spirituality and recovery, the 12 steps, the Enneagram. It all kind of feathers into just really incredibly rich conversations. For those of you listening, we've been talking about the Typology Institute Enneagram Assessment. You can go to my website, ianmorgancron.com, and check that out. We've been talking about that. That's the assessment Jason took earlier, and where he learned that he was an Enneagram 3. And we're super proud of it. We spent just a considerable amount of money with a research psychologist and their team putting it together so that it was efficient and really valid and helpful. So check that out. And Jason, thank you so much again.
Thank you, brother. So good seeing you. Anthony, so great to connect, man.
Yeah, same, man.
And Typology Tribe, remember these words: may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, and may you have rest. Until next time.